almost everyone who's actually got rich got there in a way that would just make an absolutely terrible YouTube video, which is not what I'm going to do because no one would watch it. So what I'm actually going to do is try and explain how and why people get rich, what it actually looks like, rather than one of the flashy videos, you know, like my last video, the Instagram video. It is true, I went through what it actually looks like and what is realistic. So if that isn't very practical, what is? And that's what I'm going to try and achieve in this video, because just doing decades of something really boring on purpose and sticking to it, not like a stock pick, is actually how the majority of people build wealth. And the fact that this stuff is boring is exactly why most people never do it. As we all know, if it was easy, everyone would. Now, first I want to look at what is boring in practice. You know, it's easy to say, oh, you know, people who do boring work tends to be the ones that make the real money. But how do we define that? What makes something boring and unattractive and as a consequence makes more money? Well, later I'm going to go over these two, which are how you can help yourself with your personal finance, but I'm also going to talk about business a little bit as well. But the main thing we're going to be looking for on building personal wealth and ignoring all of the different strategies you can take is compound growth is essential, that's a must, and low fees. And if these are two very small requirements that you have for building wealth on the personal finance side, if it's so easy and simple, why doesn't everyone do it? Well, that's what we're going to get into later. So with the psychology of building wealth personally, not as a business, we'll get into a business later, is why your brain and why your psychology fights the boring path of building wealth. Why is it so difficult to do the really boring but simple thing? And why is it really attractive to take a different path? Well, as we all know, it's very simple kind of logic in our brain that we don't want to put in the hard work for a long period of time. We want to kind of sacrifice that and have some fun in the short term because our brains will naturally, you know, crave something really fun now. And while yes, it seems silly to be doing, you know, expensive things in the short term, sacrificing your future to have fun right now, it's actually really difficult to break away from that path because it's not anyone's fault that people do that. Yes, it can be their fault that, you know, build habits, but it's just human nature. So you've kind of got to put a lot of effort into rewiring your brain in that sense. And as a consequence, people will get, you know, high living expenses. You know, there's really, really stupid living expenses out there. I'm sure you've seen loads of things where, you know, there's articles on people who make $100,000 a year and still live paycheck to paycheck. And then as a consequence, people say $100,000 isn't a lot of money. It's not loads. But I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who you give them $100,000 and they wouldn't be poor anymore, you know? Like, there is certain choices you make that you spend your money on, and then you blame, oh, I don't have enough money. Well, why don't you spend your money a bit better? But anyway, people just don't trust the wealth building process, which I understand, I get. I mean, it's very difficult to blindly follow something and just hope that it will work, right? Or they don't think the sacrifice that they're making is fair. Maybe they do understand the process. They do know what they're looking at. But they don't think, oh, all of this effort, it's just not worth it, so I'm just not going to bother. And then the main thief of why people don't end up building large amounts of wealth is social comparison. Now, obviously, you can go on Instagram and see all of these, you know, fake rich people, and they're showing off their rented cars, and everyone believes it, and their houses. Dubai is like the perfect kind of marketing location, if you will. Obviously, there's real wealth there, but there's also a lot of fake. And people will look at that and see like, oh, I'm older, or oh, I'm more intelligent than these people, or I'm more experienced than these people, and I'm still not making loads of money. So something's just wrong and it doesn't work. And it's so easy to think that. And it's understandable, but you've kind of got to develop the skills in your own brain to realize what's real and what isn't, and just trust what you do think is real, which is very, very difficult to do, but such is the nature. Now, the exciting stuff that actually does sabotage people, you know, as I mentioned, Instagram. Some examples would be, you know, day trading. That's such a really, really easy scheme to promote. You'll see it online. You'll see courses for sale, blah, 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 on all social media. And it is something that you could get rich overnight, but you could also lose all of your money. It is almost gambling. And the same with, you know, meme stocks and, you know, cryptocurrencies that are less secure. It's all the same thing, really. It is just kind of gambling. And again, the influencer content where it's like, get rich by, you know, 30 while you're still in your 20s doing this. And you want a car like me, you can have a car like this and a watch and blah, blah, blah. It's either making someone rich via the course, not by what they're actually doing, or they're just not rich at all and it's fake. And then there's a tiny, tiny percentage where it's actually real, but it's very hard to suss that out. And that comes back to my faceless Instagram video, where I kind of exposed the problems with the industry, while it is great that there are some things that people miss when they're trying to sell you on it. So go watch that if you're curious. But the key thing here is the mindset shift. It's reframing how you're going to make money and how you're going to build your wealth as an identity and patience rather than, a series of clever moves. There's no book that says do this, 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 and this, and it'll be fine. It's got to actively change in your brain. And I appreciate that that's difficult, but that's just how it is. Now, back to these two, which is what I was talking about, is these, I'm sure you've heard of them, a Roth IRA, which is American, and an ISA, which is almost the UK version that's slightly different, which I'll explain. But business growth, which I went over in another video, which obviously you're welcome to go and watch, can provide you with cash in a decent quantity, but building personal finance wealth rather than business wealth is where these two come in, because it's all about tax avoidance and compounding. Now, both of these, a Roth IRA is kind of like a retirement account, right? Whereas an ISA is something anyone can use and withdraw from at any age, whereas a Roth, you withdraw at an older age, which is fine. And then an ISA, you can withdraw whenever you want. And when I say withdraw, both of these are like financial accounts, right? So you'll deposit whatever it is into it, cash, invest in whatever you want or hold the cash, and then withdraw it later. And the idea is that you don't pay any tax. So on the Roth, you don't pay tax at all upon withdrawal, which is fantastic. The ISA isn't quite as good. For whatever reason, the UK government just loves the thought of taxing people. And there's a limit. Now, this limit's about to change soon. So basically, you're limited not by the tax rate, it's your regular tax rate, but by the total deposit. So I can only put so much in, and then anything more than that, I will have to pay tax on. And this deposit counts on profit. And this profit, could be interest. It could be dividends. It could be appreciation on whatever asset you're holding. Because as I said, you don't have to hold cash. You can hold stocks. You can hold literally anything. I personally in mine have index funds. And if you want me to go over that in a future video, I can. But the key thing is both of these have the compound interest, and providing you're investing in the right things, so no fees, and the asset compounds, that is what you want. That's exactly what you want out of both of these. And that is how people genuinely build their wealth on the personal side. This and real estate are the two biggest ways people grow their wealth. Not actively, this is passively. This is how people, it's behind the scenes. It's the boring and slow way, but it works. Few people will actually choose to take any action on, either of these because they're really boring and they're really simple and it's not very exciting. It's so simple, this is really easy to understand. And if there's any finer details on rates, fees, blah, 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 you can go and Google that. I use Vanguard personally. Completely up to you whether you want to use it or not. But that's just what I use for my index funds, which I hold in my ISA. And then I try and get as close to the annual limit as I can. And it's really boring, but it works. In crises, like a certain American politician that's just ruined everything for everyone. Except for a very small number, of course, but we won't get into that. I only lost 1% over a really big crisis in my ISA, just from the S&P 500, FTSE 100. Again, I can go over these in another video if people are interested. And then my personal stock pick, which I won't talk about now. It's boring, but it works. And it's a tough sacrifice, not because it's physical hard work, but because you just have to trust the process. And it's really difficult to see something go down. My graph, if you zoom out, it will kind of look like this. But then if you go into a really small detail, it will look like this. And then there'll be a drop, and then it'll go up, and then there'll be a drop, and then it'll go up. And it's really, really horrible to look at on the days where it's all red. But you just got to trust the process. So probably because it's a tough sacrifice for a long time is what discourages people, rather than, the people who want to do a few hours of work really hard on a drop shipping store, which I'm not judging you if you do. Drop shipping isn't bad, but they want to do a few hours of really tough work and be done. And that's kind of the difference between the long-term compounding growth for personal finance and business growth. That's kind of the difference.